back again with the business series, starting a jewelry business from scratch, episode number 3. If you haven't already seen episodes 1 and 2, I'll link them above. But episode 1 was about how I started this whole journey with zero knowledge of jewelry making or having a business. And episode 2 was taking my 3D printed wax pieces and then getting them cast into silver. Here's a 3D printer that I use right there. Now, I have to be transparent because I believe transparency is key to having a successful YouTube channel. I tried to do this episode without a script, but I quickly realized that I'm not very natural or free-flowing on camera. I am a pretty charismatic and outgoing person in real life. However, content creation is still a skill that I'm learning. But I want to share that with you as the viewer. The real process of how I'm learning, of how I'm trying to navigate this whole journey that is content creation. I do use ChatGPT, but it's a tool, you know? It's like a wrench. It's very useful when you need to turn a bolt. However, it's not going to turn the bolt for you. Anyways, moving on. In this episode, I'm going to cover how I polish the pieces, what I use, all the materials that I bought, listing them for sale after I have them nice and polished, my first sales and customer reactions, as well as the challenges I've run into so far and where I'm going to go with after selling my first pieces. In other words, how am I going to scale this business up? So let's jump right into it. The polishing process is the first step after casting. If you've ever seen a raw piece, and I actually have one right here, you can see that it's not very nice, and you can still see where the sprues were put on the plastic model. I'm trying to keep my face out so it stays in focus. And even on the front side, it does look nicer on the front side, but it's kind of rough around the edges. So how do I get this piece right here to look like the finished product right there? It looks way nicer, way more polished and shiny. And I'll actually show the other one that I have on here. I had two different, one with the loop that you can see right there, and then one without the loop. Anyways, how do you get from point A to point B? What I did is I used a Dremel tool, and then I used varying degrees of sandpaper. So actually right here, I do have the Dremel tool. This is a wall plug-in Dremel tool, very simple. I use this to take off all the hard crud that's on there, and I also use it at the end when I use the polishing compound. But in between that, I use varying degrees of sandpaper. I start at 200 grit, then I work my way up to 3,000 grit. I go in increments of 200, so 200, 400, 600, 800, 1,000. Once I get to 1,000, then I go 1,500, then I go 2,000, 2,500, and then 3,000. 3,000 is the last sandpaper that I use until I use the polishing compound. I don't know if I have it around here. Can't find it right now, but that's okay. I use the polishing compound along with the Dremel tool. I use a soft brush or a soft drum, and that's what makes it pop, and that's what makes it shiny. That's what makes the piece nice and pretty. Moving on to listing the pieces for sale. After polishing, I would photograph the pieces and then I would put them online. Right now, Facebook Marketplace is where I sell all my pieces. I did try Etsy and Depop at first. However, the market for jewelry there is so saturated that it's hard for me to get my pieces in front of the customers that would buy my products. And unless you're paying for ads and already have a huge following, you just kind of get buried under the thousands of sellers that are already established on that platform. So that's kind of why I went to Facebook Marketplace. It's more local, it's more direct, and I can actually connect with my customers. I can actually interact with my customers on a more personal level. So when it comes to my pricing model, I'm very transparent with my customers, and I'll explain it to you. Here's how it works. I'll take the silver weight and then I add the casting cost. After that, if it's like $12 to cast and then $3 in silver, $15. So then I 2x that. No labor charge because I'm just not at that level yet. The sale for it would be $30, so $15 profit. I tell people this on the listing. I tell them whenever they hit me up for the piece, and I even tell them in person. I thrive myself on transparency, and I'm proud of that. I think it builds trust amongst the creator and then the consumer, because how I view it is, how would I want to be a consumer? If I'm the customer, what would make me more inclined to buying product A versus product B? And I feel like a main part of that is transparency. Now let's talk about some of the sales that I've had and some milestones that I've hit. I've only had 5 sales so far, and one of them was actually shipped through the post office, but the rest were hand delivered. And if I'm being honest, meeting people in person can be nerve-wracking. I mean, you're meeting complete strangers, but I always chose a public spot so that way everyone feels safe. But there's just something about handing over a product in person that feels authentic and fulfilling. One of my favorite moments, and it's actually one of my more recent sales, and I'll get into it right now, was the customer had gotten the piece and they said, "Wow, dude, this is just like what it showed in the pictures." So it definitely felt really good that I was able to meet his expectations. He had a high expectation and I was able to deliver on that. So moving on to the milestones, my first big win, which was my first sale, was 3 Texas pendants in a single order. It was $120 in total. Then I sold a Roxas pendant, Roxas from Kingdom Hearts. He has a little pendant that he wears on his jacket. It's a little X. I sold that for $150, and that was my biggest sale so far. And it reminded me why I make what I make, because I love it. Designing something that I'm passionate about connected me with a customer who also shared that passion. So it just makes it more authentic. I'll be real. The market saturation can feel discouraging. I mean, and this goes with like any small business that's starting up. It's easy to think that maybe the jewelry business isn't going to work, or maybe my small business isn't going to work. But just to give my reason of why I started jewelry in the first place, yes, the market is crowded, but the profit margins are huge compared to other types of small products. The potential upside outweighs the saturation. If you can carve out your own lane, then like the sky's the limit at that point, and that's really what I'm aiming for. With that said, not everything sold for my first batch. I've made 2 runs so far, and I still have stock. I still have some rings I haven't sold, and I still have some pendants that I haven't sold either. However, I'm still like $1,000 in the hole after buying like my printer, all the materials, all the tools, even all the silver that I bought for this business. I'm still $1,000 in the hole. However, even though I'm not profitable, I think it's important to show you that downside that I'm still experiencing, because this is like really what building from scratch looks like. It's going to be hard in the beginning, but eventually you really start to blast off if you keep on grinding down the wheel of progress. That's a bad example. I don't even know what I was trying to say there. So, moving on to the scaling. Where do I go from here after selling some of my first pieces? Oh my goodness, I have something super important to share. After I made my first sale, I framed my first dollar. That is something to behold in my eyes. Honestly, something I'm very proud of. This is the proof of concept. This is a physical proof of concept for my business. But to move on to the scaling point that I'm trying to make, where do I go from here? Silver has been a great entry point. It's affordable, it's accessible, but the downside to that is that the margins are very tight. And let me explain. Right now, silver is around $1.42 a gram. If I make a pendant that costs me $2 plus $10 in casting, that's a total of $12, right? So when I 2x it, I'm making $24, which means that the casting cost is my biggest expense. However, if I were to make that same piece in gold, gold is around $120 a gram. So if I make that same pendant in gold, it costs $120 plus the same $10 casting fee. The intrinsic value of the gold already covers the piece. When I 2x that, I'm selling it for $240, and the margin makes way more sense. Of course, with gold, the risk is higher, the upfront cost is much, much bigger, and the polishing mistakes stack up very quickly. If I'm polishing silver and I lose some of it along the way, it's only going to cost me like $1 or $2, maybe $5 at the max. But if I'm polishing gold and I'm losing gold, that stacks up very, very quickly, and that can mean $50 to $100, like that, gone instantly. So breaking into gold means starting small. I have to be extra careful. I have to make sure that I'm confident before I scale up even bigger. And that's where the transparency comes in again. Big name jewelers can charge way more because of the brand name, but I'd rather keep my pricing honest. And it shows customers exactly how I calculate things. As a customer myself, I would want that, as I explained earlier. So just to kind of close out, kind of slow down a little personal reflection for a second. I'm still figuring out how to be comfortable on camera, how to free flow a little bit better. I try not to look at the script as much and try to look more at the camera. Anyways, the creators that I look up to for trying to be a better content creator is Markiplier. What stands out to me is his authenticity. He doesn't constantly, shove sponsorships in your face, and he seems like he's about building real connections. He pushes his own projects with confidence, and that's the kind of creator that I would like to be. I don't know if this channel is ever going to blow up, but that's not really the point. The point is to document this process and to show the reality of building something from scratch, whether it be a YouTube channel or whether it be a jewelry business. And I just want to inspire people to take their own passions seriously, because if you can turn what you love doing into something that sustains you, not just financially, but in fulfillment too, that's the dream. And that's essentially what I'm chasing here. So with that said, episode 3, we talked about polishing, we talked about some early wins that I had, I shared some real numbers and some challenges I'm facing. Next time I'm going to talk about how the scaling has worked, if I was able to successfully break into gold, into creating higher ticket items, and some of the experimenting that I'm planning to do going forward. Anyways, Star Sauce 19, stay loose, stay loud, deuces.